Yeah, time slot. I think it's just a popular subject. We all want discussion in our classes, and we all struggle with it, and I will say that I am one among you with that. So, inevitably, students say that they do a lot of discussing in my class, and I always end the semester thinking we have not done very much. So, I always want more. There was actually an art quote that I saw out there when I was walking around. It was Michelangelo. It was something along the lines of, may your aspirations always achieve your abilities, or something to that effect. And I think we all try to do that. So, we've got about 50 minutes. Let's jump right in. By the way, this is my PowerPoint. There are no themes. There are no colors. My wife said, you're not even put a theme. And I'm like, look, I don't care. The only reason I did the PowerPoint was because Carolyn sent an email and said, if you have a PowerPoint, send it over. It makes it easier for the taping and when they put it up on YouTube. So, this is what we've got. It's all Carolyn's fault. So here's what I want to start with just a simple question. Why aren't students engaged in class? And by engaged, I don't mean just zoned out. I mean, why aren't they talking? I mean, when I talk about engagement, I want them talking to me and talking to each other. So here's what we're going to do. I need you, first of all, to think of 1 to 3 reasons why your students are not engaged in your classes. Okay? I'll give you just a second, a minute to do that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go around the room, and every single person in here is going to give me 1 reason. Now, if we get to you and all 3 of your reasons have already been used up, which they very well might be, tell the one you would have told anyway, because that way we'll see, you know, kind of like one may have 18 responses on it. So, I don't know all of your names. So what we'll do is we'll just go around the room, and we're going to start back in this corner with some guy back there, I don't know who he is. And so we'll start with him and just work our way up and down the rows. I'm just going to be here typing like a madman. And so we'll just go up and up and up and up and down and all the way around to some woman over here. You know, it would be easier if they like named buildings after people so I could learn that. So, I prepared that one. All right, so I need to make this so I can type things. So, let's go. Give us 1 reason back there, guy in the corner.
They like to text.
Like to text. All right, next.
Me? Oh.
Yeah.
I think that they are afraid of the stupid question.
All right, next.
Topic is not relevant.
Nope. Or not spelled correctly. Next.
They're working on other assignments.
Next.
They're sleep deprived.
Sleep deprived. Next.
Out of class distraction.
Next.
Perception of the instructor is negative.
We're going to run out of room in a hurry. Next.
They didn't read.
What?
It's shocking.
This is a support group.
If you're in the arts and sciences, Matthew Melton talked about the importance of testimony. So,
Afraid of being wrong.
okay, I'm going to start adapting things. Afraid of stupid questions / being wrong. All right, next.
That was me.
That was you.
Yeah.
Next.
The question that the professor's asking is vague.
All right.
Shy, introverted.
At Lee? No. Just an English major. Okay, next.
They don't know the material.
Okay.
The instructor does all the talking.
Next.
They don't know who they are. That's deep.
Good, this is working on that. Next.
Not prepared for class.
I'm going to put that there. Next.
They're intimidated to talk in front of other people.
Next.
Afraid of the content.
I'm trying to see if I can put that anywhere else, but I'll just.
I think don't know the material.
Next.
I had, all my 3 were taken, but I think, like unawareness of the relevance of the material for them.
So topic not relevant, or they don't think it's relevant. Okay, next.
Maybe the instructor hasn't asked the right question.
Vague question, wrong question. Next.
Personal problems.
Next.
They didn't actually show up.
Yeah, you have big room for that one.
Legit, guys.
Kind of hard to talk if you're not in the room, so. All right, next.
90% of the gig.
They think that I'm digging for something specific.
I'm going to put that on vague question, wrong question, even though it may be their fault. Or afraid of being wrong. Or afraid of being wrong. Yeah, let's put that up there. I like that. Next.
They think this class is stupid, and why are they here?
Not relevant, yeah. So not just topic is not relevant, whole class is not relevant. College is afraid of sounding dumb. Next.
Not confident in their answers, that might be kind of like unprepared, but they might have done the reading but still don't feel confident enough to put something together to say out loud.
Okay, we're going to put that afraid of being wrong. Yeah. Good. Next.
Sleep.
They're asleep?
Yes.
Okay. We'll add one to sleep deprived. Those two might go together. Next.
I think they're going to have the wrong views on something or the wrong opinion. Similar to the.
Yeah. Okay.
Afraid of being embarrassed?
Yeah. Seeing a trend. Next.
Lack of background information.
Didn't do their research.
I don't know, sure. It could be that they just don't know something, but we'll just make don't know material. Okay.
Yeah, they just have no clue what's going on.
We'll put that there. Okay. Bored. I'm going to put that as not relevant. I would hope if they think it's relevant, they wouldn't be bored, but one never knows. Okay.
On their phone.
Text. Like the text phone. We'll just go with that.
I'm gonna go with maybe we're not engaging.
I'm going to make that with instructor does all the talking. Not that we're not terribly engaging when we talk, but just to that.
In our school, it's working on other assignments and sleep deprived, for sure.
Which is funny because I've seen people working on your assignments in my class. But that's my fault. Wasn't meant to be that at all. All right.
They're in competing clubs and don't like each other.
Oh, that's interesting.
Let's put that with personal problems. It's not really the same thing, but I'm going to make it the same thing for the point of space. So, okay.
Unmotivated.
I'm going to put that with topic as not relevant. Didn't read. It's all kinds of things. We're just going to put it there.
Relevance.
Relevance.
Millennial, like there's sort of a cultural shift where they have a groupthink mentality, so stepping out and being out there in the material world a little more.
Okay, so this is, we're afraid of being wrong, but that group think idea. Okay.
I'll go with different read. Didn't read.
Didn't read?
My case is fictional, we're trying to use another language.
Yeah. It's a good thing my department chair is not here. I'd make a crack about my French skills. It was so bad, and I spent 2 years being that student.
So I don't really know what this would go under, but I get a lot of students and they're just wanting an A, so they don't want to talk, just tell me what I need to know to get an A.
Oh, that's interesting.
Grade grubbing. They're not here, I can say whatever I want.
Because try as I might, I can't hide the fact that I deeply don't want them to engage. And they know it. I mean, deep down, truly, I don't really care what they think.
He's the one on the stand.
We used to have a professor in our department who's long gone, but his comment was, class discussion is nothing more than shared ignorance.
I think, to go a little bit along with what Amy said, classroom community. There's no community, they don't feel comfortable.
That's hard to make happen.
I made this list like 3 days ago. So I know you all came in a little late, but what we're doing is why do students not engage in classes? So if you haven't thought,
I think a lot of them just have the attitude, leave me alone with the book and I'll do fine.
If only that were true.
we're gonna put grade grooming. Let's put grade grooming. We should have put that one earlier and we'd have got more. Last one. Fear. Fear, fear, fear. We do. And it's so funny because I made a very short list of this. We're going to put this back up here. I made a short list. Mine was didn't read, not prepared. That's the one I thought you all would go with more. Don't attend class, so we got that. They don't have to. If we don't design our classes in a way that they have to engage, they're not going to engage. So if they don't have to, why would they? And then the last one I put, which you all were kind of all the way around, and I'm glad you all didn't slam high school teachers. That always bugs me when we do that. But they've been trained to. I mean, if they've come up on standardized tests, PowerPoint presentations, taking notes and spitting things back, I mean, we've spent 12 years then training them not to talk. And then we may have spent 1 or 2 or 40 more years here doing it. And so perhaps that gets a little bit on us as well. So what's the most frequent solution? One of the big problems, as you all mentioned, was they don't read or they're not there. So somebody tell me what we tend to do to remedy that situation. If they're not going to be there, they're not going to read, what do we do to make sure they do those 2 things?
Quizzes.
We give them quizzes. All right, I give quizzes. Let's talk a bit about quizzes. What I'm hoping to do today is give you 2 kind of short things you might be able to do to encourage discussion, and then 2 rather radical things you might do to encourage discussion and engagement. I like the radical, but let's talk about the short term. So, quizzes, but there are problems with quizzes. Somebody tell me some problems with quizzes.
You have to grade them.
It increases your grading load, and if you have a core class, you know, I've got a Western Lit class every semester that's 30 people. I have comp classes that are 27. If I give quizzes in all of those classes, that's 84 quizzes I'm grading every 2 days.
And prepare. And prepare the quizzes.
And prepare the quizzes.
More
and-
work for the instructor altogether.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. So this is one problem with quizzes. What's another problem with quizzes?
Takes up class time.
It takes up class time. Is this what you were going to say?
No, I was gonna say, sometimes the material is such that they don't understand it necessarily the first time through, so they may have read it and we quiz them in such a way that it doesn't look like they have.
So we have 2 problems here. One is class time. My Western Lit is a 50-minute class period. By the time all 30 of those people take a quiz, turn them in, and I start class, it is often 20 minutes into the class period. So I now have 30 minutes to talk about a play, an entire play, in 30 minutes. This is a bit of a challenge, especially as you can tell I kind of go off on rabbit trail occasionally. I'll come to Michael in just a second. But this problem of sometimes they just read really hard things. We want them to read really hard things. And they need us in some way to help guide them. Okay, Michael?
The quiz isolates them, so they're individuals.
They're individuals. One of the things we talk about these days is about soft skills, you know, about working together, working in community. I've seen some people do some group quizzes, but most of us do individual quizzes. So it can isolate them in some way. Yeah.
They hugely affect grades in our program.
Yeah, they can hugely affect grades. And again, if a student is just having trouble with that first grasp of something, that idea if they walk in, but even if they get it in the long term, it may have had really detrimental effects on their grades. Okay? Anybody got anything else you want to throw out here?
You have to show up to take it.
You have to show up. That's of course a plug for me because I make them show up, but it is a problem. And sometimes you have a student who does really well with everything else, but they just miss enough quizzes to hurt them. I think that's perfectly fine, but I can understand why the argument might be made otherwise. So, these are a few that I threw up. Of course, take up class time, take time to grade. They don't get to any deep learning a lot of times. I mean, we're essentially giving the quiz just to make them read. That's it. So if there were a way that we could show that they have read without just basic formulaic questions, maybe that would be better. And to me, they don't help lead into discussion in a meaningful way. So let me give you a couple of examples of quizzes I have changed, which hopefully lead to better discussion and lead to deeper thinking. And to me, the 2 go together. So Oh, but maybe there's no way, that was a transition. My PowerPoint skills are amazing. This is an old quiz on Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Confessions from this Western Lit class. You don't have to read it, you can see it is basic factual questions. Name one way he thinks he's unique as a child, what happens to his mother, and then I give a bonus question because I like to. That also makes them read the background information before the play. So see, this quiz is entirely designed to see just did you read. They make a 5 or a 6 on this, they read. If they don't, they either didn't or they struggle with the reading in some way. So, here's my new quiz on Rousseau's Confessions. It's one question. How is Rousseau similar to, different from, a reality television character or one of the candidates for president? This was last fall, by the way. Just for the record, equal numbers went to Hillary and Trump, often for the same reasons. It was hysterical. And there were a few Bernies thrown in, even though he was done by that time. It was just entertaining. So they have to write a few sentences about this. So one thing I'm trying to do is get them to see some sort of relevance. One of my arguments about Rousseau is that we are just as romantic as he was. We're just as focused on the self. So it starts them thinking in that way, but it still measures whether or not they read and understood the material. And note, not just read, but got some sort of understanding there, because if you're going to make this connection, then you have to understand something about Rousseau. You know, how is he like Donald Trump, or how is he like Hillary Clinton, or how is he like a reality TV character? Essentially, by the way, Rousseau just shares everything about himself. He has no shame. It's great fun. I love teaching him because they just get mortified. So, really quickly, just another example. Again, factual questions on the play Hedda Gabler. What did George do on his honeymoon? What changed it to affect, etc. And this switches to, why do you think Hedda committed suicide? So now again, not just do they have to know she committed suicide, they've got to give me some good answers as to why. And this involves them to have had thought about the play before they walk into class. Now, it doesn't get rid of the grading load. I'll get to that in a minute. This is mainly for deeper thinking and discussion. Now, here's what I'll do with this. As I'm taking them up, because as soon as somebody finishes, they raise their hand and I come and get them. So I walk around and I pick them up and I just skim them really quickly as I'm walking around getting others. So then, let's pick on some people here I know, since Chris is right there. And do you teach Hedda Gabler?
No, when I was just thinking I haven't read in a long time.
Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you about
Okay, good.
But I know that Chris does not like to talk in my class. Will, on the other hand, is just a chatterbox. I can't shut him up. If you know Will, you know it's not true. So I know Will is going to talk. So I just said, okay, class, what do you all think? Why did Hedda commit suicide? I know within 30 seconds Will is going to start talking. But I know if I just do that, Chris is not. So what I might do, I've skimmed those quizzes, and Chris has given me a pretty good answer. So I might start with her. Chris, why do you think Hedda committed suicide? And Chris will give me one reason. And then I'll just work my way around the room. Bob, you know, why else? Matt, and just go around. And then I'll say any other reasons, and then Will's hand is going to go up. So now, instead of the same 3 to 5 people who always talk, I'm going to make sure every day 3 to 5 of those people who don't normally talk. So over the course of about 3 or 4 weeks, I've hit that part of the class that's not going to talk, and the other part's just always going to talk.
Do you normally wait a few weeks in to figure out who the talkers are? Or?
I can usually figure out fairly quickly, but I will just start calling on people day 2, mainly just because that way I'm not singling anybody out. And I tell them in all of my classes, no matter which approach I take, I'll show you a different one in a second, that I will not call on them unless I think they have something worthwhile to say. Meaning, I've looked at their quiz, or I've seen something they've said, or they've talked to me about something. So that whole fear of contribution, I'm not cold calling them. I'm calling them with preparation. So whether that's group work, whether that's some sort of quiz, they know that what they're going to say is either worthwhile or it's part of a group, and so they've been able to check it with some other people. And I found that if I call on Chris, for example, she is more likely during that class period to speak again. And I've just watched it happen time and time again. And then throughout the course of the semester, she may begin to gain a little bit of confidence. So maybe I don't have to call on her by week 5. Instead, I call on somebody else more often. And so I just work it around the room. So this is one way you can use quizzes if you feel the need to do them, to actually encourage good discussion instead of just checking a box to make sure they read. But then there's another approach, Moodle forums. I've fallen in love with Moodle forums. I'll show you a couple of examples. So one, they're easier and quicker to grade. I can grade Moodle forms really quickly because it puts a grading box right on there, and I can just mark the grade and it goes right into the spreadsheet for their grades. So there's no grade the quizzes, you or your student worker punch them in, etc., etc. They can really encourage deeper learning. I'll show you that, and we can use them to encourage and facilitate discussion. Let's see, this is one. So this is one of the early readings in contemporary literature. They read 2 stories, one by John Barth, one by Donald Bartlemy, and they're supposed to all be in one big discussion group, but Catherine, obviously this was early in the semester, she hadn't figured out how to do this yet, but they'll get there. So I can click on this, and I can look at all of their responses. I was going to say if my heading was still up there, it's not. All my heading said was something along the lines of, respond to anything you found interesting in the story. It was that vague. Sometimes I'm more specific than that, but sometimes I just want, these are senior level lit people. They should be able to read a story and say something interesting about it. And they do. So here's some fun things about this. So it gives me a word count, because you can tell Moodle to do this, because I require them to write 150 to 250 words. So she wrote on the top end 250. Go her. I can look through here, and you can note she has started quoting the story. That's not a requirement. And she did it anyway. This is amazing. So what I love about this one, first off, in the School by Barth, I was initially shocked by how, by the way, it's Bartlemy, she mixed them up. I was initially shocked by how casually he described the deaths. But then I thought, oh wait, I just read Slaughterhouse-Five. Look what she just did. She made a connection to something we had read and discussed about a week and a half before that. So when I go into class, all I do is I write on Post-it note. This class meets this semester at 10 o'clock, so these are due by 8 o'clock that morning. So I come in, check my email really quickly, and then I sit down and I read through all the Moodle posts with a Post-it and write myself notes. Hannah W., death, relation to Slaughterhouse-Five. Catherine, relationship to postmodernism, whatever. And then again, I'm going to start off discussion with these people who don't talk very much. Hannah, you made this connection to Slaughterhouse-Five. What sparked your interest in that? Where did you come up with that? And she'll start talking a little bit, and then I'll run with that for a little while. So this is one advantage of Moodle forums. Here's the nice little grading part that I showed you. All that is a pull down, and you just pull it down 1 to 5. So quick scoring, and I can just go right on. It gives me a time and date stamp so I can see when they're reading it. By the way, look at this. Taylor writes 345 words, Molly writes 240 words, Chris is writing 250. They almost never write the minimum on this. I've done this in multiple classes, and they almost always, because they can't say much of anything in 150 words. And then there's dear person at the bottom. He wrote 126 words, and it was due at 9 o'clock, and he turned it in at 9:30. So I gave him 2 points because this was the first one, but normally I don't give him anything if it's after the time date. So I usually tell them that, and he struggled mightily throughout the semester on getting this done 2 hours before the class was due. So.
Kevin, can I ask a question? Do you know, can you disallow them to, like, they can't drop anything in there past the time period? Do you know if that, you can stop them from even being able to do that?
I think I have done that at one point, but there was a problem, and I don't remember what the problem was. But you can actually do that. But if I remember right, Moodle still lets them, it lets them post it, it just doesn't let me grade it. So that's what I just tell students is, I said, you can turn it in past them, but I can't grade it. So, yeah.
Just want to say there's some really profound things in there, though.
Yeah. I mean, he says some decent things, and that's why I want to give him some points. And then I'll just remind them in class, remember, it's the first week, but you need to get them in by 9 o'clock, and so, yeah.
In a forum, is it private between you and the individual student, or can the entire class see the responses?
Everybody can see them, and I love this for a few reasons. One, sometimes people will springboard off of each other. I tell them I don't require you to reply to other people, but sometimes they do. And especially when we get to that really hard material, I can see students who are struggling, but I tell them, I say, if something's hard, just try. And what's really good is a lot of times somebody will say, this article just killed me. I struggled so much with this. And then somebody else will be like, I thought I was the only one. So that whole fear factor, that imposter syndrome that so many of our students struggle with, they can see, oh, I wasn't the only one who struggled with this. This is really hard stuff, but I can still try to engage with it. And then maybe, sometimes I will actually jump in and say, okay, you all really struggling with this idea, look at this website, and it will help you with that. So these are the reasons I like to make it public. I assume there's a way you can make it private between the instructor, but I don't know that there is. And I just like the whole tree thing so we can all just read it as we develop.
Can the students see the scores as well?
They cannot. Not of each other, only themselves.
Okay.
And usually it takes about 30 minutes, I think, for those to post.
You don't have to stop and tell them why they got that grade.
They've never asked me about that. And again, I will admit that I tell them, essentially, if they say something reasonably smart about the text, they get fine. Mainly the ones who don't are the ones either not hitting the word count or not getting it in on time. Which I will say, and sometimes they just don't do them. Because of course they haven't done the reading. And I asked a student once about this because I was debating, should I do Moodle forms in a 200 level class? Should I keep quizzes? And she said that the Moodle forms made her work so much harder than quizzes did. That she could kind of fake her way through quizzes in a way she couldn't do the Moodle forms. Now, do some students, spark note something and get by on a Moodle form? I'm sure they do. But they also do that with quizzes, and they do that with all kinds of things, and I can't solve all the problems in the world. That's not my plan, too. Let me see. Oh, let me show you one other Moodle post. Just because this is on Toni Morrison's novel Beloved, and they had to read a critical article. I tend to pair critical articles with novels in my 400 level classes. So again, what I really like to point out is Molly here writes 350 words. She quotes the novel once, or the critical article twice, and I think Taylor down here she quotes the critical article twice as well. Again, that's not required. They just do it because they've got the idea and they're going to write it anyway. Does every student do this? Of course not. But do some of them? Yeah, and I'm going to use them. And so of course, the other thing I like about having this public, they can see other people's responses and see that theirs aren't measuring up.
Right.
So if this is the first post and somebody's written 350 words and quoted the critical article twice, and you're writing 120 words that say next to nothing, you might respond to that. And hopefully, hopefully not shame you. Yes?
I have the opposite
Cyber
problem.
shame.
They quote the whatever so much, I don't get any of their own thoughts.
That's a good point. And what I would do in that situation is simply tell them, you're only allowed one quote.
Well, that's what I ended up, I was stuck, that's the only thing I could do.
Yeah, syllabus is like the real estate contract. That like everything you put on a syllabus is because somebody got away with something in the past. And so yeah, this is exactly, as soon as, and I was the student who tried to get away with things. So when I make assignments, that's my first thought. It's like, how would I try to subvert this? And once I figure out those ways, I try to just short end it. That's not the right word at all. Short circuit. That's what I try to do. Short circuit it. I like language. So, is that on the Moodle forms? Yes. Oh look, it's a transition. How students can help. Now, I know, student course evaluations get a lot of grief and come in for a lot of criticism. What do students know about teaching? Let me tell a couple of stories. So I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago. By the way, my contemporary lit class last year made fun of me because almost every class started with, I was listening to a podcast. And I was listening to this podcast. It's from high school teachers. It was a high school science teacher. And she talked about a class that she designed. And she had a moment with her students. It was called a Critical Friends group meeting. Does anybody know what Critical Friends is? I'd never heard this, but I always like to ask.
Like the qualitative critical friend?
What do you mean?
Well, there's a critical friend analysis in qualitative research where you get somebody that knows a little bit about the subject and they look over your data and then they determine if you're biased or something to that effect and help you out.
It is absolutely along those lines, but specifically geared for education.
Okay.
So if we had a critical friends group in your department, we'll say, you and 3 other members of your department would meet, say, every 2 weeks. And you would run lesson plans by them, you would run assignments by them, they would observe your class, you would go and observe their class. So it's kind of this intensive look at teaching, but that idea of critical friends, so yeah, they're being critical, but in a very positive way. we all want to help each other improve as teaching, so this is becoming a bigger thing in K-12 education. I like it a lot. I'm a big fan of going and observing other classes and talking about teaching, et cetera, et cetera. But, so this teacher had this senior level class, I think it was advanced biology, and she was trying some new things, so she wanted student feedback. So she had a critical friends group meeting with her students that was moderated by her academic dean. And it was 75 minutes long, and she said she learned so much from those 75 minutes. The best thing of which was she had been wanting to do something in a class but didn't know how to do it. And one of the students said that she had actually pulled that off in that class without really knowing it. And she's like, oh, that's how I do it. So then she could take that and take it into other classes. These were high school kids. And one of them had this insight. So, a couple of days ago, I emailed the English Honor Society, of which I'm one sponsor, Sigma Tau Delta, and I said, hey, I'm doing a presentation on Friday on engaging students in class and improving discussion. What do you want professors here at Lee to know? So, this is what they told me, and then we'll transition to other things. They said, one, create a safe space. Because that fear that you all talked about, you all are so much better than I was. I didn't even put that on my list, and the students went to that immediately. And they said things about where, when they've said things in class, they have been ignored, just like turned and went and did something else. They have been shut down not for their ideas, but for their contribution at all. Because we all know if you're going to engage them, you should shoot down ideas that are wrong, incorrect, flawed in all kinds of ways. But there's still ways to do that where you still create that community idea. One of the best is to have other students shoot them down. Well, I'll go back to Chris. Chris, what do you think about it? So you can do that. And in fact, one specifically said she didn't want to feel stupid. I like this idea. One student told me, she's now a teacher, and she said that when students would make a really dumb comment, she was amazed that I could keep a straight face. I said, I just learned how to do that. And now she's a teacher, and she knows how to do that. And you need to do the nod. And then you find that one little glimmer of anything in there that you can do something with, and you do something with it. So, which actually brings me to another thing they said was let the students lead, or at least think they are at times. And what I've done, I've stolen this from improv. If Dan Buck was here, we'd make him tell that improv. It's called yes and. In improv, what you do is if somebody puts forth an idea or a situation, your job is not to deny them that situation. It's to say yes and then build on that situation. So I do this in class discussions, and I've had students say things I'd never thought of, and I'm just like, I'm just going to go with that. So I'm going to yes and that, and sometimes I tell them what I'm doing and say, let's just see where this goes. And sometimes it's led me to all kinds of interesting places. And sometimes it leads us 10 minutes off the road and we come back. They like the idea of not cold calling, but using things like groups. One that I'd not really heard before is they asked something remotely controversial like, do you think Hedda committed suicide because she was selfish or because that was her act of agency? Raise your hand if you think she was selfish. Then raise your hand if you think it was agency. And so if Matt raised his hand because she's selfish, Matt, why do you think she was selfish? So you've already given them a little bit of time to process that, and they can think about it, and they know that there are other people in the room who agree with them, and then they're more willing to speak. So I liked that idea. See, the student just gave me an idea, I'm going to steal it. Oh, and this was my favorite, talking about not being there. Students in one class were not counted present unless they spoke. And she wrote, as you might imagine, this increased class participation. You think? Great. It must be a small class. I can't imagine doing that with a class of 40. And I can't imagine keeping track of that. You know, if you've got a TA, I suppose you could, but I don't want to be up there with like a poster board or something checking people off as they go. So, that's my transition because I use students to help me. What do? These are my two kind of crazy ideas. I've crowdsourced. You all know crowdsourcing, right? The social media, because I'm all over the Twitters. I have no idea what I'm talking about. What did you say?
He's like, he's not even on.
I do actually have a Twitter. I don't have anything else right now. So when I was on Facebook, we're really encouraged to teach creative summer classes. So I knew I was going to be teaching a summer class. So I put up on Facebook and I said, hey, if you could take an English class on anything, what would you want it to be? And I just let the results start rolling in. And dystopian literature happened to win. It's not really my thing. I've read most of them. I'm fine with them. But I thought, well, I could teach 1984, Brave New World, and Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, which these days, of course, is all the rage because of Hulu. And I thought, yeah, I could do that. That could be fun for the summer. Let's do that. So then I went back on Facebook and said, hey, you all chose dystopian lit, so what would you assign? Tell me some books here. And I just put together this list, and they pointed me to some things that there's no way in the world I would ever teach or even acknowledge existing. Hunger Games. Sorry, Donna, I don't know young about lit. But they helped me come up with a class. It was a great class. It was a small class, but we actually had a music major take it because she just liked dystopian literature. Best thing is we read a critical article on the first day, and as she was leaving, I said, so how are things going for you at this outset? She said, well, I'm not in the music building anymore. And then, surveys in contemporary literature and American novel. The one thing we struggle with in our department is it okay to repeat books? You know, if they've already read 1984, should we really teach that again? Or should we expose them to something else? There are arguments to be made on both sides. But I tend to avoid it. I like for them to read new things, especially in something like contemporary literature. I really like to expose them to new authors. So, how do I know what they've read? Any ideas? I ask them. It's a crazy idea. I will talk to certain colleagues, and they will say, well, I just don't know what to teach. I don't know what they've read. I'm like, send them an email. How hard is this? They're like the little technological generation. They'll respond the day before class.
You can set up a Goodreads account and let them all participate in your Goodreads account.
What?
You can set up a Goodreads account and let them all participate and create their own list of things they've read. And you'd have an entire list of books that they've already read.
You can. And actually what I do is I just set up a survey. I use free online surveys. Most people around here use SurveyMonkey. And I just said to them, I said, this will take you not 5 minutes. And usually I have 3 columns. Have read, haven't read, have never heard of. And then I know. And they did tell me when I first started this that it made them feel dumb because they don't read a lot of contemporary lit, so they didn't know anything on the list. So now I add a disclaimer. Like, I know you probably haven't read most things on this list. I just want to check. So this is kind of a moderate. This didn't shake up my classes too much. But then there was this past spring. American novel. They did almost everything. So what did they do? First of all, they helped choose the books. I sent them a list of probably 50, 60 American novels. And I said, send me your thoughts, 2 novels from each century. So 2 from the 1800s, 2 from the 1900s, 2 from the 2000s. I don't know what we're going to do with that. Now, I would not have chosen at least 2 of the books they chose. They fought hard for Barbara Kingsolver's The Poisonwood Bible. It's a really good book, by the way. It's about a Baptist family that goes to Africa, and they're not, well, the father's not a very good missionary for a whole host of reasons. It's kind of tailor-made for Lee. And I've taught it before, but it just hadn't crossed my mind this time. And I mean, they fought for this book. I'm like, well, I don't really know. And I'm getting emails through the semester like, you really need to teach this. This is great. I'm like, okay, fine. The other one they went with was The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I read it when I was their age. Normally, the whole class, by the way, was centered around race and gender. So, Poisonwood Bible, narrated entirely by women who are dominated by this man, makes perfect sense. The Color Purple, female narrator, African American, who is oppressed by this man, but then there's interesting gender relationships, etc. But I hadn't read that book since I was their age. I tend to teach Toni Morrison. But I thought, well, fine. They really like it. It's a great book. It won the Pulitzer Prize. I'll teach it. You might want to guess what 2 novels most of my students wrote about? Those 2. Now, some of them wrote about Invisible Man. Some of them wrote about Louise. Fine. But they were so invested in some of those novels. The discussion was amazing. And they wanted to write about them. So I gave them a little bit of agency, with a little bit of control, by the way. Moby Dick went in because I said it went in. The Invisible Man was going in no matter what. But I gave them some sort of feedback in this. And of course I could have overruled anything. But it made them feel invested in the class. Then they selected the course assignments. It was a night class. So the first night I had assigned them 2 readings, some theory about gender and some theory about race. But otherwise I said, all right, we're going to come and we're going to plan the schedule out tonight. And that's what we did. So I said, what types of assignments would help you learn the material better? So here's what one student said. We were debating about should they teach any of the classes or not. And this student and a couple others had been in a class where I'd done that, where I assigned them, or they chose a story and they had to teach it. And she said, I'll be honest, I hated doing that assignment, but it made me know that story better than any of the others we covered. So I think we ought to do it. And she convinced the class to do this. So note, she chose a harder assignment than I might have given her because she knew it would help her learn better. By the way, if you do that in August, you can sell them on it. If it's October, no, because then everything's busy. So that's one thing they did. Oh, here's the other fun part. Most of these were English ed majors, by the way. That wasn't by design, it just happened that way. So it was fun to watch them work through the education part. So like one of them said, well, I really don't want to write any short essays, because I normally have them write short essays and then a longer essay. She said, I think we could do some other things. So I said, okay, fine. So they start talking about other things they can do, and then 5 minutes in, another student said, but wait, if we don't write any short essays, then we turn in that long paper, that's the first time we get any feedback from you on our writing. And that's not helpful. And I said, nope, sure not. What do you want to do about that? They said, let's do a couple of short essays. Because they know if you ask them what's better for them, they also just know what they don't want to do. So you give them that option, and when they see that this will hurt them if they don't do it, most of them will realize they should do it. And so they did give them put on the course schedule. The other crazy thing they did, I've never done this before. We finished reading the novels about 3 weeks before the end of the semester. All we did the last 3 weeks was the major paper. Just solid, hard driving. Normally I spread that out over like 5 or 6 weeks, really spend some time on the process. They wanted to hammer it. And they did. Like we came to class, they did rough draft works, we did peer editing, we did group conferences, we did all kinds of these things. Did that work as well as I would have liked? No. And here's the only flaw with it. They just didn't have time to think through their paper topic as long as I would have liked. But they liked the course design. Fine. Here was their only complaint about the course. They ended up teaching too many of the classes, they said. They wanted me to do more of the teaching. I am thrilled with the result. Because what they realized is they were having to do too much of the work and they wanted me to stand up there and do it for them. Some of them, by the way, were fabulous teachers. And I told them this, because some of them are out student teaching right now. I'm like, you all are great. You taught in a way I don't teach. So I'm using that idea again in 2 of my classes this semester, but I'm adapting it. Because I've had them try to lead discussion. As you all know, leading discussion is hard. If you're a junior who has no training in leading discussion, you will not do well at it. And let me tell you how I found this out. I needed to be away at a conference. 2 of the groups were signed up to do the teaching that night, so I thought, fine, you all are going to have class while I'm not here. And the CTE, thanks to them, scheduled somebody to come and record that class. And I came back from my conference and I watched the class. It was so abysmally bad. Because I tried not to interject when they were teaching anyway, but I would at least try to steer occasionally. Like one of the students made a great point. They were talking about differences in gender, and they said, you know, when people carried books in high school, that boys and girls carried books differently. And her comparison was that boys carried books like a football, girls carried books like a baby. And I'd never heard that before. And so she made that comment, and then there was just kind of like a silence, and then the group just went somewhere completely different, went to the next question. And I'm like, oh, what you could have done with this. Yes, and that's where I got that idea from, by the way. And so I realized that leading discussion was much harder than I thought. So this semester, I'm allowing them to either do a presentation to the class or lead discussion, because I don't want to impose my pedagogy on them. Because if they want to do a presentation, and that's more of their style, that's certainly a worthwhile style. Many of them will do it the rest of their days, whether at work or if they're teaching or whatever. So standing up in front of people and talking is perfectly fine. So, do I have another slide? I do. Oh, last. Use the first day of class. What are most professors going to do on Tuesday? Hand out the syllabus and then do what with it?
Start lecture.
I hear, yeah, it's back here. They're going to go over the syllabus that our students can read. So, the first day of class, what is the tone that has been set by the professor?
I'm going to read to you.
I'm going to read to you, I'm going to talk to you, you need to do nothing that day but sit and listen, and that's the tone of the class. I do not like this. Let's do a quick count here. How many of you have spoken at least once during this session? Raise your hand. You said you.
Everybody.
Everybody. How many of you have spoken at least twice? So we've gone down to about 10, 12. Anybody 3 times? All right, that's not bad distribution. In all of my classes, on the first day of class, I do something where every student has to speak. And when I do this, I usually do it, I say, you give me your expectations for the class. By the way, sometimes they're much better than mine.
Yeah.
But mine are always simple things like, you will read, you will write, you will think, and number 4 is, you will talk. And I say, I know you will talk because I will make you, because I've just done it to you. And so from day 1, the first 20 or 30 minutes of that class is them talking and me responding to them talking. So on day 2, they're not surprised when this happens, and hopefully they get into that routine early enough that it becomes better and better as it goes. So, set the tone. We teach students to be passive. We have to teach them to be active. I stole this idea from a great book, J.R. Howard's Discussion in the College Classroom, available in Squire's Library, by the way. So that's where I got it from. I may have stolen many of these ideas from Howard. I have no idea. Here's what I do for pedagogical research. I read like 20 books over the course of a period of time. And when I say read, I mean read. Because a lot of times, like growth mindset is really big right now in a lot of books, which essentially says you don't have a fixed mindset. You can improve if you work hard. So Carol Dweck is the one who did this research. Almost every book I looked at this summer had a chapter or 2 on Carol Dweck's growth mindset. I don't need to read them all. I read one and then the rest of them I just skimmed. I essentially skim pedagogical books for ideas that I can steal, and then I go back and see the research on it. So, I don't know what I stole from him, but I stole a lot, so read his book, he's fabulous. In fact, look, it's a picture. Yes, I can add pictures to PowerPoint, I just don't. I can't stand PowerPoint. So, I said I'd be done by 10 till. It's 10 till. But, does anybody have any other questions or comments? See, this is the bad thing. I tried to have you all talk, and I ended up talking still too much. Katie?
When you do the more open-ended quizzes that get responses,
Yep.
Is there any challenge in grading those? How do you handle that?
I underline what is good in their quiz. I read them really quickly and underline, give them a score and give them back. No, because usually, again, if they've read, they can answer the question. If they haven't, they usually tank it. And a good 3 or 4 out of 30 students will usually just wrote, I didn't read. Like they won't even try to fake it. Because it's hard to fake, why do you think Hedda committed suicide? And sometimes they'll even write like 2 sentences trying, and then they'll just say like, I'm just quitting right here. 0 for you. You might have fooled me and gotten 2 or 3 points, but.
I guess too, if they know you might call on them, they're not going to want to fake because then they have to fake the class.
Oh yeah, calling on them helps with that a lot. Yeah. And what I've done in some classes, especially with Moodle posts, is the first day or 2, I'll put examples of good ones up on the screen and talk through why they're good. And then that tends to help with that. All right, we'll go here and then we'll go there.
Yeah, your approach to incorporating Freudian pedagogy and empowerment in the classroom is appropriate. It does work, and maybe that some other folks here within the room had the same feeling that I had. That maybe because we didn't say too much, well, we spoke once, but I bet that several of us actually had what we call intra-partial communication. We talk with themselves about the topic, how well you present.
Yeah, and that's why I like those things like the Moodle forums, because that gives those students a way to show what they know. And I can, even if I don't call on them, I'm like, man, they know things. Yeah, cool.
These are largely dialectic, kind of cognitive rational, or discussion-based classes where you're talking about a book or you're talking about something that's just idea-driven.
Yeah.
would you have any thoughts on, I see how some of this would apply to a really practical class, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I was thinking through this a couple of days ago, and I thought, this is where I struggle. Because my discipline is so discussion, idea-oriented. You know, how do you deal with this in a science class, in a nursing class, in a comm class, where it's, you know, you need this information, and then you need to go apply it. Because some of those classes are already practical, in the sense of they're putting into practice things they're learning. So to me, that's still active learning, and it's engaged learning. So I'm perfectly okay with that, to say, well, okay, you're not having discussion, but you're having student engagement. Like a big talk right now is about problem-based learning, PBLs. And it's essentially where you give them a problem and their job is to go solve it. And so, yeah, they're having other types of discussion, whether in a group, whether within themselves, whether with the material. They have to do that to create things. So yeah, creative, practical classes are very good. Thank you all so much.